You're listening to Art of the Unknown, the podcast about traveling inwards, outwards, and onwards. Hey guys, and welcome back to the show. You're listening to episode number 29, and I'm your host, Sarah Cruz. So welcome to another week of the podcast. So for those of you who already listen to the show, you know that one of the main themes of the podcast is about traveling inwards. And of course, on that journey inwards, one of the things that I knew I was going to come across but didn't necessarily want to go down that path was the path of repressed emotions. And the fork in the road has finally appeared, and that is the direction that we are headed down. And I'm kind of okay with that. From kind of researching and looking into what exactly repressed emotions are and where they come from, I can confidently say that I probably have a lot of repressed emotions. So there's probably a lot down there that I'm fully unaware of and fully unconscious of. And I think it's about time that I guess I kind of crack that baby open and see what comes out, right? So let's talk about some repressed emotions, okay? So first off, what are repressed emotions? Okay, so from my understanding, what I have kind of gathered on the topic is that repressed emotions are the emotions that over time you have been suppressing, you have been pressing down, you have been ignoring, you have been denying, you have been outright trying to deny their very existence. And because of doing that over time, repressed emotions are those emotions that you are no longer aware of because you've gotten into the habit of suppressing them, and throughout time, it just becomes the natural, I want to say, reaction to when that particular emotion comes up. So basically, it's a part of yourself. It doesn't have to be a bad emotion or a good emotion or anything. It's basically just a part of yourself that you have denied, suppressed, and rejected over time. And because of that, those parts of you have kind of removed themselves from your conscious experience, because that is kind of what you wanted. You wanted to push those suckers as far deep and as far down as you can so that you did not have to acknowledge them and did not have to basically accept their existence. And yes, that is something that we all do, and that is something that I feel like I'm really good at. Again, I believe it's a learned response over time, because when something comes up and you don't want to feel it, of course you're going to press it down. Like, I don't want to feel things I don't want to feel. So why would I? I can just ignore it and deny it and pretend that it doesn't exist, because that's what I'm good at. So yes, repressed emotions would be those emotions that you are purely unconscious of because you have chosen to do that. And it's not like we came to the choice to repress our emotions consciously. I believe that it's something that happens over time. It's something that we pick up when we're younger, because it's kind of something that we are ultimately taught to do. When we come into this world, we are exposing, I want to say, it's almost as though we're exposing all of our soul at once, because we're so young, we're so innocent, and we're just pure, and that's who we are. But over time, we have learned to push parts of ourselves down, ultimately in order to seek love and approval. So when you've created that habit or that response of pressing a part of yourself down in order to seek that love and that approval, it's going to become, I want to say, like second nature. Like, you're going to keep on doing that, and you're going to take those habits into into the future with you and into different relationships and into different aspects of your lives, because that is, again, what we've learned to do. Okay, so where do these emotions go when they are becoming repressed? And well, what I think happens is I think that those emotions, they actually still live inside of you. They don't become processed, they don't become released until they are fully felt and understood and basically no longer needed. And for me, I can physically feel myself suppressing an emotion. And one of the ways that I do that is by eating, by drinking, by pretty much doing anything that'll distract myself from confronting the way that I actually feel and feeling it completely. And recently, I've been becoming more aware of the reasons why I stress eat and what it feels like internally. And I can literally feel myself pressing down an emotion when I am eating. And I feel like a lot of my repressed emotions live in my stomach and my lower back. And that is why we are physically pressing them down. We are physically pushing them down our energetic body, because the further they become pressed down, the further away they are from us having to express them and us having to feel them. So besides physically, mentally, and energetically trying to remove that emotion from your field of consciousness, another place that I think that those repressed emotions go is out into the world as a form of either projection or a form of judgment. So basically, when you have this feeling of whatever it is, guilt, shame, whatever, living inside of you, and you do not want to deal with it, you do not want to see it, and you do not want to even recognize it, what is going to happen is that emotion is going to come out somehow, and it's going to come out in the form of a projection or a judgment. So you're going to see those qualities that you have within yourself. You're going to see those in somebody else, and you're going to find either fault or judgment in that other person, because that is the part of you that you are denying within yourself. And of course, projection and constantly judging others is not a healthy and efficient way to deal with a part of yourself that you do not want to accept. And of course, what you're doing is you're projecting that wounded part, that hurt part of you onto another person, because when you're doing any form of projection or placing judgments, that doesn't feel good. And I think the only time it does feel good is because it makes you, it's almost as though you're building yourself up to be a better person solely by putting another person down. And finding fault in another person doesn't make you any better than them. All it does, or all it's doing, is taking the hurt that you're feeling inside of yourself and then pushing it onto another person, and I guess subconsciously hoping that they feel that hurt that you can't take on yourself. And by not accepting the parts of ourselves that are whole and that live within inside of us, I think that contributes to these cycles of pain patterns. And instead of healing the pain that lives within ourselves, what we're doing is we're pushing it out back into the world, and thus creating more pain that becomes kind of like a ripple effect. And that is not the solution to whatever feelings or problems or whatever that we have living inside of us. That is not the way that we are going to heal, and that is not the way that we are going to take responsibility for whatever is happening inside of us and whatever we are creating and putting out into the world. Okay, so bottom line is that yes, I have repressed emotions. I think pretty much everybody on this earth has some form of repressed emotions or memory, or there's something that is being something that you're basically not aware of, which I would consider that your blind spot in a way. You do not see the things, and how can you know what you don't know, right? So dealing with repressed emotions, the question becomes, how do you unrepress an emotion? Okay, how do you go about making the unconscious part of yourself conscious? How do you go about finding out the very thing that you are not aware of? Okay, and I'm going to say that is like repression. Unrepressing something is going to be a process, and that is going to have to be done, at least I think, slowly. Okay, I don't know if you can go dive into your unrepressed part because you don't know what it is and you don't know what's in there because you're not aware of it. And this particular part of the psyche that we're referring to is referred to as the shadow. And becoming aware of that part of yourself and accepting it and ultimately loving it is referred to as shadow work, which is definitely a rabbit hole, and that is something I think that people need to dive into when they are ready. Not necessarily when you feel like you want to, because of course nobody wants to go into the uncharted territories of the soul. I mean, well, I kind of do sometimes. Hence this podcast. But anyways, that's a different story. So inner work, I think, would be kind of like what this whole making the unconscious part of you conscious, I think that is a huge aspect of this inner work that people talk about. And of course they talk about it, but they don't necessarily give you a little roadmap to do so. And I think one side of that work is going to be cultivating the very things that you want, the very things that you are. It's going to be cultivating that feeling of love, compassion, acceptance, all that jazz, right? But then there's going to be a flip side to that coin, which is going to be discovering the parts of yourself that you don't know exist, discovering the parts of yourself that you have over time disowned, ignored, and ultimately rejected, okay? And by treating yourself like that, of course there's going to be some pain involved, okay? You cannot completely disregard and disown a part of yourself without it being painful in some way, because that is a part of you, okay? And yes, this shadow work is going to be about uncovering those things that exist, but also giving yourself the compassion and the love, because it's not going to be easy and it's painful, because you're going to have to feel those pains again. You're going to have to feel the very thing that you did not want to feel in the first place. And it's not going to go away until it's dealt with, okay? It's not going to go away until it's fully felt, fully processed, understood, and then released, okay? And that is going to be a part of this work that people refer to as inner work. So since I've accepted that this part of me definitely exists and it definitely is down there, I think the next part is learning how to approach it. And for me, one of the things that I'm trying to understand about my shadow is what it actually looks like, what it actually is. And I think going the route of beginning to want to see it and trying to visualize it, I think that is helping me in a way kind of approach it, because when I can visually see it and I can visually know what's there and I can feel its energy, that's when I can start to go towards it. And of course, dealing with the unconscious part of yourself, that's going to be different for everybody. But I think a good start would be recognizing that it is there and then slowly taking the steps to approach it. And there's been I've heard of different techniques and different things to do in order to go about making the part of you that you're not aware of out into the open, because that's going to be difficult. Like I said before, how do you go about basically knowing what you don't know? And And there's going to be a few techniques that you can go about doing this, okay? One of them would be recognizing what are your triggers? What are the things that give you these intense emotional responses? And yes, that is, I think, very easy for us to begin to identify, because there are times when I just get so freaking pissed off at somebody, or I can't stand someone and I'm like, this fucking bitch. And I'm like, whoa, girl. Whoa. That's a trigger, obviously. So there's going to be times like that when you are just so, I don't even know what you want to say, not just pissed off, but you are reacting so strongly in a way just because of what you see, or what someone did, or what someone says. Or there's been times I walk past somebody and I hear something that they're saying and I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me right now? And they weren't even talking to me. And I'm just like, whoa, okay. Yes, that is a trigger, and that is where you can start, okay? Because that is kind of, I think, something that is very obvious. So when you find that you have a trigger, that is when you can start kind of working your way backwards. So identifying what your trigger is, and then begin to look for its opposite. When you think that somebody is being, it maybe pisses you off when somebody is just being really, I don't know, you perceive them as greedy. Understanding what exactly is bothering you about that person, and then reflect it back onto yourself. So if this person is pissing you off a little bit or making you uncomfortable because you feel like they're being greedy, maybe you look back into yourself and be like, what parts of me are actually greedy? How am I actually greedy? What do I do to hide the fact that I feel greedy? Or what do I do to disguise it, or to cover it up, or to push it down and push it away? And I think that by taking that reflection back onto the self, that's when you can kind of go down that path and discover where these feelings of greed came from, and why you're becoming so reactive to that trait in somebody else, because I think that is an indicator of what is happening inside of you. And again, we're all human. We all have aspects of ourselves that we don't necessarily want or don't necessarily like. But I think that is part of this process of understanding and ultimately loving the self, is to take everything, take the good and the bad, take whatever is down there, because that is part of you. And you can't love and accept yourself if you're not fully loving and accepting yourself. And that means everything, okay? So aside from taking those triggers and those responses and reflecting them back at you, another way that you can go about, I want to say, understanding the that deep, dark part of the soul, is recognizing emotions when they come up, and then working your way back in the form of a linear timeline. For example, when you feel something coming up, you can ask yourself, be very honest. This is the thing about understanding this part of yourself, is that you need to be honest, okay? You cannot approach this with any form of unacceptance, because it is that unacceptance that put these emotions, that put these memories, and put that whatever back there in the first place. So coming to this with honesty is going to be very, very, very important, okay? So being completely honest with your feelings as they arise. And that is something that I have a hard time with, okay? Because when something comes up, I don't want to feel it. I don't want to recognize it. I just want to deny it. And I also like to pretend that when things happen, I like to pretend that they don't bother me. And accepting how I feel is very difficult, and that is part of this learning process. Okay, so first would be accepting how you feel in the moment, and then taking a step back and asking yourself the question, when did I last feel this way? When can I remember the last time that this emotion came up? And then play it out again, understand it, look at yourself from a little bit of a objective view and seeing that, yeah, this happened once, it happened again. Okay, I get that. And then going a little bit further back, ask yourself, when was the first time that I felt this emotion? And yes, that is definitely now going back into probably roots regarding childhood, the past, whatever, whenever that emotion came up first, try to think and feel as far back as you can, okay? And then once you can identify the first time that you remember feeling that way, you have to live through that experience again. You need to feel everything that you did not feel in the first place. And yes, this is going to be hard. This is not going to be easy. This is not fun, but it is the honesty. This is the acceptance. This is confronting a part of yourself that lives within inside of you that you have been pretty much denying since its creation there. And it's necessary to do if you don't want to be attached to the past and you don't want to be attached to feeling like you need to suppress a part of yourself in order to fully love yourself. So when you can go back and see that this is how this experience in your life made you feel, and you can see that was the first time, the next step would then be to look at that experience from a outside perspective. Take yourself back a little bit and look at yourself almost as though you are watching everything play out and watching that experience happen, but you're not involved. You're purely a bystander. You're just purely watching it, and watch it with the intention of seeing what else you can learn. What else can you gather? What else can you see that you currently or that you couldn't see while you were fully involved and fully experiencing that and fully feeling it? Because there's going to be other things that you couldn't experience and you couldn't gather from that situation because you were in it. So taking a step back and trying to see the situation in a different way is going to be very helpful in understanding that hurt and then moving on from it and realizing that you didn't have to close yourself off like you did in the past. And maybe you can honestly see that while some hurt did occur, it wasn't necessarily, even though you felt like it was directed at you personally, it really wasn't. It was somebody else living out their own pains that they felt. And I think realizing that can definitely come with a sense of freedom. So like I said earlier, embarking on this journey of inward discovery and reflection and understanding, of course, I was going to come across the topic of repressed emotions, repressed memories, repressed anything, basically. And I really think I came to this when I was ready, because it is a difficult part of yourself to not just embrace and try to integrate into your life, but also a difficult part to approach. And I think by really trying to understand the part of me that I have been denying and rejecting and ignoring, I really think that has been helping me to not just understand myself as a whole, but also see the ways in which I react to other people and see the ways that I kind of present myself to the world without really understanding why I do that or where that came from. So the way that I've been trying to approach this part of me, this shadow, whatever you want to call it, I feel like I've been approaching it very, very slowly, okay? I will set aside time where I know that I'm going to go into this uncharted territory of myself, which is a little scary. I know it sounds maybe a little bit crazy, but I will basically set up time, set up space, set up whatever so that I can purely focus on going inwards. And I've been approaching this part of myself with a lot of patience as well, okay? I'm not trying to dive straight in. I'm really trying to kind of take the layers off as they appear to me, because I know that in order to go deeper, I have to kind of start with whatever comes up first. Start with the things that are on top. Start with the things that are the most obvious. Start with the things that I need to deal with first. And then I can begin going deeper and deeper and deeper and seeing what else is down there, because you know it's a rabbit hole, okay? You know it's not going to end. And I mean, there's no point in just trying to dive as deep as you can, because I also feel like that is going to come with a form of resistance as well. You're going to be like, oh, I'm slightly aware of that part of myself, so I don't necessarily need to go in that direction, or I don't need to deal with that, or I don't need to confront that. And then again, that's just continuing to press it down. Acceptance and honesty, those are going to be key here. And the thing with doing this kind of shadow work, or whatever you want to call it, the way that I see it is that the thing that lives inside of you that you are unaware of is very complicated, okay? There's a lot of different parts, and sometimes you can only pull out one part at a time. It's almost as though these things they're so connected, they're so linked together, and you can only take out one tiny chunk at a time. You're not going to be able to approach this all at once. And that's how it's been for me. So I've been really trying to do this slowly but surely, okay, very patiently. And one of the first things that I came to realize about myself is that I've been repressing feelings of disappointment, okay? For me, whenever a feeling of disappointment comes up, I like to push it down. I like to pretend that I don't feel it. And I think that I've been doing that because I guess what I realized is that I've been experiencing disappointment not my whole life, but I felt like in a way that's kind of how it started. It started with me feeling disappointed, not just in myself, but who I am, and almost as though who I was disappointing to other people, which caused me to carry on that feeling and then feel that disappointment within myself. And of course, you don't want to feel like you are in a way not worthy or not loved. So of course you're going to push that feeling aside. And I've come to realize that over the years, I like to pretend that I'm not disappointed, or I like to not confront that aspect of myself, because I, in a way, was almost reminded of the core issue of the disappointment, where that issue or where that disappointment came from and why it exists in the first place. And now that I realize that I've been repressing that emotion, I feel like the next part would be accepting the fact that I get disappointed, being okay with myself feeling disappointment, realizing that the disappointment is not a reflection of who I am. And I think that understanding the emotions that you keep hidden inside of you, I think that is the only way to kind of integrate them and make them a part of who you are, because we as humans are capable of experiencing the whole entire range of human emotions. And when you start picking which ones you don't want to feel, that is going to not only shut you off to that emotion in general, but it's also going to, I think, slowly shut your heart off to feelings in general. And by pushing these things down and pushing them away, it's almost as though you're just closing a part of yourself off, which as a result is going to close off other parts of the self. And to really embrace self-awareness and to really embrace becoming aware and discovering who you are, you're going to have to go down that path of accepting the things that you did not want to accept about yourself. And like I said, one of those emotions is definitely disappointment. And another one that I've been coming to realize lately is anger. I have a really hard time not just feeling angry, but expressing that I'm angry, letting other people know that I'm angry. And I remember back in the day, I would just tell myself, I would tell other people that I am not an emotional person. I was like, I don't get angry. I don't. All of these I don't. All of these I can't. All of these ways of pushing myself to be and to feel what I actually truly wasn't feeling. And I feel like now that I'm coming to go back and confront these feelings, that is why it's a little bit difficult, because I've gotten used to living my life not acknowledging this part of myself, not being open to feeling some sort of pain, because I guess early on I learned that pain doesn't need to be felt if you don't acknowledge it. Okay, if you ignore it, then it's not going to be there, and that's not true, because it's going to live there. It's going to live inside of you, and it has to come out. And by repressing these emotions of disappointment and anger and pain, I've also been closing myself off to accepting love from other people, accepting love from myself, basically accepting the good parts, because I've been closing myself off to the bad parts. And going down there and trying to understand the things that I've been repressing, that isn't going to be just these negative emotions that you want to feel, okay? Since I've been doing this, I've also been discovering that I have been repressing good parts of me as well. I've been repressing, okay, so I'm not exactly sure how to explain this very well, so I'm just gonna try to do it the best way that I can. So one of the insecurities that I have is about my looks, okay? So I feel like that is affecting me in a negative way, because I'm constantly putting myself down. I'm constantly not feeling like I'm good enough. And I'm constantly, basically, in a way, almost, I'm not like ashamed of the way I looked, but I don't like my general appearance. And that, I feel like, was an indicator that, yes, there's something that needs to be discovered, okay? There's something that needs to be dealt with, and there's something that needs to be uncovered here, because that feeling and that wound, I think, goes a little bit deeper. And by trying to really understand the unconscious parts of myself, what I discovered is that when I was going backwards and trying to be like, okay, today I feel gross, I feel ugly. Okay, when was the last time I felt this way? Okay, when was the first time I felt this way? And I realized that that feeling of feeling unattractive and unworthy, that never, I couldn't recall myself feeling that way as a result of anything in the world. And I realized that the only reason I feel that way is because I am creating that thought. I am allowing myself to feel that way. I am allowing myself to continually put myself down simply because that is what I think, I don't know, maybe I should do, or that is what I feel like I think I need to do. And by doing this internal discovery and seeing what's down there, like, I realized that the thing that I've been repressing is that feeling of beauty, that feeling of objectively beautiful. What I'm saying is that there is that feeling of beauty that we are all entitled to have. That is a feeling, okay? That is not an indicator of the outside world. That is purely a feeling. That is an emotion. That is something that we can experience internally. And I know that I have been shutting myself off to feeling that purely because of my own doing, my own minds. Maybe, I mean, there's obviously some indicator from the way that society is structured and all of that, but it made me realize that I'm the only person stopping me from feeling that way. And with that realization, it didn't really come a sense of relief. Instead, it was more like a sense of sadness, because I've been treating myself this way and I didn't have to be. I've been causing myself this pain when there was no reason for it. And I feel like looking back and seeing myself as a child and seeing myself just from, living this life from the ground up, I feel like that feeling is one of the things that I've been repressing. And again, it's not like you repress negative things, okay? You can also repress the good parts of yourself just because that is what we were taught. That is what we were conditioned to do. That is what we learned to do. And again, you're not going to realize that's down there unless you go and look, unless you go and try to see what you've been denying yourself, what you've been wrongly experiencing because you didn't have to experience it. And again, what is down there is not always going to be scary. There's going to be good parts of yourself that you didn't even know existed. Maybe there's this aspect of creativity or this part of you that's completely 100% vulnerable, which is beautiful, which is lovable, but you've been denying that part of yourself because you wanted to keep it safe. You wanted to keep it secret. You wanted to keep it untouchable. And I'm sorry, but we're all here as human beings learning how to exist on this planet, okay? Nobody's opinion of ourselves is the right way. And I think by becoming fully aware of what is inside of us, that's the only way that we can fully love ourselves and to release whatever pain that we have been holding on to, that we learned that we should have, that we've been feeling bad about, or that we've been taught that is not the way to feel. That is not the way to do it, okay? Your existence is wrong. And that's not true, okay? How we exist and how we show up to the world is not wrong. It is who we are. And I think that going into and understanding what you've been repressing is just going down there and understanding the other side of you that you've been ignoring. And again, as you can see, it's like there's going to be a lot down there. There's going to be a lot. It's not going to be easy. And this path of self-discovery, who said it was easy, okay, people? Who said it wasn't going to be a little painful? And you know what? That's just the way it goes. And I'm okay with that. And even though it's hard, of course, there is light on the other side of the tunnel, okay? Going into the shadow and going into the unconscious does not mean that you have to live there. All it means is going down there and seeing what is down there, because it's just opening your eyes to a new part of yourself. And I think the benefit of doing this is it's ultimately directed towards self-love, self-acceptance, honesty. And I think with it becomes this sense of lightness, because holding on to these emotions, these memories, holding on to whatever that you do not need to hold on to, once you can finally let go and release and move on, I feel like that's just when you start to develop this sense of lightness. And again, it's not easy, but from my understanding, this is the only way. This is the way in. And it's where I'm at right now. Oh God. Okay, I think I'm pretty much gonna wrap this bad boy up. And yes, if anybody wants more information about anything I talked about, repressed emotions, the shadow, whatever, you can go to my website, and if you click on the show notes for this episode, I'm gonna have just basically some information so that you can start going down this path for yourself if you want to. My website is artoftheunknownpodcast.com. So you go there, you click on podcast, which is the podcast, obviously, with the show notes. And under this episode number 29, there will be a link to some information if you so desire, some resources, some articles I stumbled across, some guided meditations I stumbled across. And yes, if you like the show, head to iTunes and give me a review and a rating if you so desire. I would really, really appreciate it. And other than that, I want to say thank you for everyone that listens to the show. And yes, I will be back next week with another episode, and I will talk to you then.